This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jensen. The show, of course, live broadcast from the studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, we're also streaming live on YouTube right now, but the show is always available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now today, we'll be broadcasting live from the World Forestry Congress in Durban. Well, it gets underway shortly, and it will be held there for the rest of the week, until the 15th of September, actually. Brené Heine will give us an update from there shortly. If the Congress is a little bit behind schedule, well, we'll continue with our normal newsroom programming here. But first, let's get a quick news update on this Monday morning from Anine Doma.
Good morning, I'm Anine Dormal. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. Newly elected ANC Youth League President Colin Mayane has called on the league to refrain from resolving political issues through the courts. At the close of the league's 25th National Congress in Midrand yesterday, he said members who headed to court last week to try and stop the Congress will be expelled. ANC Youth League members in the Northwest who launched the court bid alleged there was irregularities in branch membership. Talking to Morning Live earlier, he also said it's back to basics for the league.
You have apologized for the way in which the league behaved under the leadership of Julius Malema. How do you want to do things differently? What are your plans?
Well, we have said that we must go back to basics. Historically, we've got twin tasks as the youth league: rallying young people behind the banner of the ANC and making sure that we advocate for their aspirations. So we think that that is what we must continue to do as the ANC Youth League, and nothing else and nothing less.
Today, the 14th World Forestry Congress gets underway in Durban. It's being held in Africa for the first time. Forestry experts, environmentalists, government leaders and civil society groups will engage on how to best manage one of the world's most critical natural resources. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to open the Congress this morning at Nkosi Albert Lutulian's National Convention Centre. Later, we will be crossing to our reporter there on this channel. The girlfriend of the late hip-hop star Nkululeko Flaba Habedi will go on trial today for allegedly killing the artist. Sindisiwe Makwele will appear in the Randburg Magistrates Court this morning after being arrested and charged with murder. She claims to have acted in self-defense after being attacked. Flaba was found dead in his flat in Alexandra earlier this year. Cape Town police are probing a case of arson after 3 people were killed in a shack fire in an informal settlement near Philippi on the Cape Flats. Residents allege that the fire was started following an argument yesterday. Police say a 4th person has been hospitalized with serious burn wounds. 2 others were killed in separate fires in Yanga and Gardens. And in London, an inquest into the death of Annie Devani will resume this week. North London coroner Andrew Walker will decide on the scope of the inquest on Wednesday. He may indicate whether Annie's widower, British businessman Shireen Devani, will finally be called to testify. Devani was accused of being the mastermind behind Annie's murder on their honeymoon in Cape Town in 2010. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Simply search for SABC Newsroom. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Annie. Now, the 14th World Forestry Congress, hosted by the Republic of South Africa, kicks off today and will last until next week, the 15th of September. The meeting will bring together the global forestry community to review and analyse key issues and to share ways of addressing them. The Congress, the first to be held on the African continent, include people from all nations, regions and sectors belonging to government organisations, NGOs, private companies, scientific or professional bodies, forestry societies, or simply have a personal interest in attending. According to the United Nations Environmental Programme, 80% of the world's original forests have been lost in the last decade alone. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa will officially open the Congress this morning at Inkosi Albert Lutuli International Convention Centre in Durban. Now, for a quick update, let's cross to our reporter, Renee Heine. She's standing by. A very good morning to you, Renee. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Evan. Yes.
Renee, just set the scene for us. What's the expectation from the 14th World Forestry Congress?
Well, I think, as you've said, it's an extremely popular conference, and it comes on the first time to African soil. And it's also in Africa, where we've seen great progress being made in the last few years. Lobby groups have indicated that there's been progress in terms of reforestation. We've seen in countries such as Malawi and Ethiopia, where reforestation actually helped with improving agricultural progress in these countries. So it's really on a huge level important for the livelihoods of people. People who make a living from not only indigenous forests, but also from commercial forestry, and that's one of the very important issues for South Africa. 1% is contributed to the GDP from commercial forestry in this country. So, to find a balance is really what these delegates will have to do over the next few days, but at the same time also make it viable, make it economically viable for people to get involved. And this is where the South African government is very strong on this issue, to expand into rural areas and actually come up with good forestry practices in these areas. And we have a very responsible forestry industry as it is, looking at sustainable development. But like we said, the theme here is people and forestry and sustainable use of forests all over the world. And, of course, this is the answers they have to find in the next few days. And it's also very important because it comes in a year where the Sustainable Development Goals come to an end. It expired. They expire at the end of this year. And there's also the Conference on Climate Change in Paris at the end of the year. All these issues will be in the minds of the delegates here to come up with good practices and policies to shape the future of the forests around the world.
Renee, we're seeing wonderful pictures coming live there from outside the ICC of, it looks like firemen and women ready to march. Tell us about this maybe, and tell us about the official program for this morning. Are we seeing the Deputy President there this morning?
At this stage, from what I hear, the Deputy President will be here this afternoon opening the conference. But we have delegates from all over the world here. Like you said, we have international guests. We have also Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma from the OAU. She's here. We've got the ministry here, the Deputy Minister and Minister of Forestry. And so it is really all eyes of the world, and to preserve the forests of the world, it's all here. And I think you've also been seeing some of the pictures of the firefighters, which also form a very important part of preserving forests and putting out those fires which are such a big threat to the forests in the world.
Yes, South Africa's Working on Fire program will be one of the discussion points in the plenary sessions. I wanted to ask you about climate change, though, because climate change will be a key issue that will be discussed. What sort of resolution do you think will be taken to COP21 in Paris later this year from this conference?
Sorry, could you just repeat that again?
It's climate change. So climate change will be a key discussion point. What sort of resolutions do you think will be taken from this Congress to COP21 in Paris later this year?
Like I've said, it is incredibly important to look at the ways of preserving forestry, obviously with sustainable use of commercial forests and even of indigenous forests, because all those areas are under huge threat. And this is what they will have to keep in mind. And I think people also, because it's people and forestry, bringing the ownership and custodianship of forests back into the hands of people. And that is one of the focus areas of the conference. Can I introduce my guest at this stage? It is Ken Carstensen. He's from the Forest Stewardship Council. If you could just tell us, what would your focus be at the conference? What would you think these delegates should be focusing on to come up with viable solutions?
They should focus on finding ways to deal with creating conditions for sustainable forest management, creating the benefits out of forest management for local communities, for the workers in the forest, creating the environmental benefits. We think that we have a lot of tools to actually do that, and getting together here thousands of people involved in forestry to inspire each other on using those solutions, I think, is the key issue.
And do you think countries are committed to this? I mean, there's often been said the political will needs to exist to make this a success.
I think countries will not do this alone. I think it's enormously important to get the market involved. That's what we do as Forest Stewardship Council, making sure that companies can certify the forest they buy from or the forest they manage. But then governments need to be involved as well, knowing that the market wants this and that companies, local communities and environment organizations are all pushing in the same direction.
If we were to look at some of the biggest threats, can we just talk about some of these issues that will be discussed here and where there will be perhaps decisions made on?
Well, we see forest fires in many parts of the world coming up as a huge, huge issue, and they need to be dealt with. The links between forests and climate change and finding ways in which forests can actually be avoiding climate change and survive climate change is very, very important. And I think those areas, together with those social issues of how do we make sure that local communities and workers actually benefit from forest management, that's going to be the key.
And in which countries do we see a lot of this that need to be done? Can we focus on certain areas?
Well, we can certainly focus on a lot of the tropical forests where we see enormous problems still. This conference is very appropriately held in Africa. Africa is facing a lot of challenges with forest management in this continent, and I think finding solutions for Africa is one of the things that we will also want to look at, because that is crucially important.
And it's very important because it's held on African soil. Would you agree that the gains or benefits that have been made since the last conference in 2009, which really included reforestation and also, of course, the banning of illegal timber productions, would you agree with those aspects as some of the gains that were made since the last conference?
I think we've achieved things. I think that there's an increased focus on legality, and I think we are moving in direction of being able to make sure that forest management is to a higher degree legal. We haven't solved it, but we're getting closer. And I think the issues of managing forest is something that is coming higher on the agenda, and I think a meeting like this one can galvanize that will, both from the market, from the communities, from the environment organizations, and hopefully also from the governments.
And we've touched on the issue earlier about bringing this to the very important, bringing this in line with the important development goals, and then also with the climate change. Is this going to be a push strongly from this conference, perhaps, to try and influence these policies?
But certainly from our side, as private actors in this conversation, we want governments to make sure that the Sustainable Development Goals will include meaningful indicators for sustainable, responsible forest management, and also that this gets included in what's going to be discussed at the Climate Change Conference of the Parties in Paris later this year.
Thank you very much. And that was our guest, Mr. Ken Carstensen. He's from the Forest Stewardship Council and also being involved in these very crucial talks over the next few days. Just one little statistic that we've seen in recent research is that for every person, there's about 422 trees. But the rate of the trees that we lose is something between 10 billion and 15 billion a year. So we can see the delegates here for this week have their work cut out to try and change these figures.
Thank you very much, Renee. Renee Heine coming to you live there from, the World Forestry Congress 14th one. Of course, it's being held in South Africa, in Durban, at the convention centre there. We'll keep you updated how it develops. We're not going to be going live there, as it seems proceedings will only be officially opened by Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa a little bit later in the afternoon. So we move on with what is close to normal programming. Newly elected ANC Youth League President Colin Maine says that the League will work towards strengthening youth structures around the world, especially among South Africa's main partners. He was speaking at the end of the League's 25th National Congress held in Midrand, that was north of Johannesburg, at the weekend. During his first speech, Maine told delegates that they have a responsibility to go back to basics and remember that the ANC was formed as an organization of the people. Here are some of your views on the Congress that's concluded. Of course, at times, Milan Nonsigilelo says, how long is the ANC Youth League presidential term? And if Colin Maine turns 35 soon, is he going to run his term as youth leader as an uncle? Yes, lots of people have different views on it. Tobela Chaka says, we are in this thing of ANC Youth League President Colin Maine must lead. We are the future. Yes, we are the future, he says. Ambition Gal says, Colin Maine is the president of the ANC Youth League. Let's just hope you will work with us as the youth of South Africa. Viva Youth League, viva, says the Ambition Girl. Then Joy Zelda says, congrats on the new ANC Youth League leader, Colin Maine. Respect towards the elders is everything. A lot of the youth expect changes, she says. Then Urban Dweller says, we remain young, Colin Maine. Clearly certain ANC Youth League cadres have found an elixir, that elusive fountain of youth. That one from the Urban Dweller. Of course, many views have been doing the rounds since the conclusion of matters over the weekend. Let's move on and take a look at our picture of the day. This one comes from Pre-Radio Alerts. Well, it's captioned, David Cameron will announce plans later for how Britain will help 10,000 Syrian refugees. A lovely picture there. Of course, children crossing the Mediterranean and crossing all the barriers in Europe have been a key focus over the last week or so with regards to the refugee crisis in Europe. It's not a migrants crisis, please. Let's take a look now at what's happening around the country here in South Africa. We start in Johannesburg, where late hip-hop star Nkululeko Flabba Habedi's girlfriend Sindisiwe Mangela's trial is expected to begin. Mangela is accused of murdering Habedi earlier this year. Then, still here in Johannesburg, Jan Pieterse is expected back in the court today for cross-examination. Pieterse allegedly attacked his former girlfriend Ines Antonio with acid, resulting in third-degree burns over more than 70% of her body. Then in Witbank, 6 suspects accused of armed robbery and the attempted murder after shooting ANC member Jackson Mthembu in Emalahleni last month are expected to appear in the Magistrates Court. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. Welcome back. Only about 14% of South Africans read books, and a mere 5% of those who read to their children. This has been revealed in a study conducted by the South African Development Council, the conveners of National Book Week. Now, to mitigate these troubling statistics, National Book Week, that officially kicks off today, has introduced the hashtag campaigns. The one is hashtag buy a book. Books will be sold at exclusive books for of reading here in South Africa. To tell us more, well, we are joined in studio today by one of our local authors who's lending her voice to the cause, Zelda Lechranchi. Good morning, Zelda.
Good morning,
and then, of course, Mr. Benjamin Trisk. He's the CEO at Exclusive Books. Good morning to you.
Morning
also,
to you, Urban.
Thanks for helping us. Zelda, your involvement, the numbers are staggering, aren't they? But your involvement in National Book Week, just get our heads around it.
Well, I think even from my perspective, my book is an easy read. It's sold very well in South Africa and across the world. But despite the fact that it's an easy read, if you look at the statistics, not many people read in South Africa, despite the fact encourage people, but also to make books accessible to people. We find with social media dominating our worlds, very few people spend their data on actually reading. So we need to bring about a change in culture with people, because we can't all travel, but we can all read, and it's like taking a journey, a virtual journey, and we need to open our horizons by reading.
So Tris, 20 Rand a book at Exclusive Books, the Buy a Book campaign. That's very generous.
Well, it is done for a specific reason. And as I've said on countless public platforms, I'm constantly concerned about the general price of books. So what we've done for National Book Week is that we've made available 9 titles across children's and adult that will talk to families about leisure reading, because the real issue is that people don't read for leisure and they don't read enough. And there are too many homes without leisure books. And moreover, the statistics that we have about reading to children is something that's replicated in the UK and elsewhere. In the UK, they found that possibly 1 in 5 parents reads to their children. Those numbers are just appalling.
That's absolutely staggering. I can't believe it that less or more than 50% of the homes in South Africa don't have a book in them at all, which is staggering. But let's talk about what you've just gone through. You've gone into the world of writing books, and you're an author now, internationally published author at that. But tell us about how better can we in South Africa support our authors in order to make the entire process a little bit more sustainable?
Well, first of all, we need to buy their books. For any reputable publisher to publish someone's book, they need to know that the book is going to sell. That's not going to happen unless the public buys South African authors. There's so many stories to be told, Eben, and I think I'm an example of this. I'm not a acclaimed author. This is a simple story that I put in writing, and despite that, the book has done very well. So there's many other people with more interesting stories, and they need to be published. We need to take the South African story abroad, but it's not going to happen unless we ourselves, the South Africans, buy the South African authors first, and the African authors.
Your hopes for this week, but not just for this week, for going forward with the kinds of processes that are being put into place now?
Yeah, but there are a number of interesting statistics. Make no mistake, Zelda's book has been a phenomenon. I'm not sure what you've sold in English. I think it's over 40,000 copies. In Afrikaans, you've also sold a huge number of books. One of our problems is that we don't have sufficient books in the vernacular. Now, at our Melrose store, for instance, where we have a growing children's market, in fact, nationally, we have a growing children's market, we're looking for books in the vernacular. And it's a struggle to find them. So that's something that has to be addressed in some way. And I know there are certain imprints that are doing it. But by and large, children's books are growing at remarkable rates. The Kindle has almost died. In other words, there has been no growth in e-book downloads, either here or elsewhere in Europe or North America for the last 2 years. So we see a reversion to books. We're seeing growth in the market. Strangely, and I was remarking to Zelda about this, we're seeing a growth in the market when everything is doom and gloom in the economy, and I think maybe people are just reprioritizing some of their expenditures.
Maybe load shedding has taught us to read also a little bit.
Well, one good thing at least, so we hope so.
Zelda,
It's either reading or sex.
Yeah, well, without trivializing it totally. Nelson Mandela was passionate about children, more so than anyone before. Education of children, getting them to read. This week, how do we incorporate his message into Book Week, and how do we bring him alive for young people again this week?
Well, we need to make the books accessible to the children, especially in rural areas. The Nelson Mandela Foundation has got a library drive together with Breadline. They set up libraries, container libraries in rural communities all companies now have that CSI responsibility. They can invest money to bring books to children. Madiba strongly believes that education is the only way we're going to get out of poverty. And I also strongly support, such a call that the start of improving education would be to make books accessible to children.
Partnerships, I think, in this, you've showed through your business that, you have to make a contribution in this space. Are you happy with big business in South Africa, the way that they look at literacy or illiteracy?
Well, I've got to be careful because I have a conflict of interest here. Obviously, if corporations become more involved, we do better. We sell more books. But a key issue here is that if you read, not only do you acquire knowledge, but your verbal and literacy skills improve axiomatically. So reading gives benefits all the time. And what surprises me is that I think the oral tradition, where you sit with your child and even tell them a story, that's also being lost in these numbers. And that too needs to be resuscitated.
Talking about that, illiteracy amongst adults, how do we turn that around? How are we doing enough to get grown-ups to read again?
Ben, I think we all know now that this is the age of the smartphone and the stupid people. People are constantly on their smartphones. We need to tap into that market too, because a lot of people who do not have access to books and libraries have access to smartphones. So we need to find a way of encouraging people through social media networks to get them reading and to get them interested in reading and not only reading what's happening on social media.
Your closing remarks, sir.
I think that what we do, and what I constantly tell my staff that we do better than most people, is we curate the national taste. We curate what people read, they find in our stores. What we need to do is now create a separate forum of discussion around major issues that affect all of us, that relay into books, where there is a kind of overlapping set.
The common consciousness, it needs to be improved, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today, sir. And Zelda, thank you very much for joining us as well. All the best with Book Week. It is, I think, one of the most important weeks of the year. We have to get our children to read, and we have to read to our children, and maybe let them read to us even before we go to bed at night. Time for us now to move on. 29 years ago today, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu was ordained as the Archbishop of Cape Town, becoming the first black person to lead the Anglican Church of the province of South Africa. Meanwhile, a joint prayer service was held in Bonteheuwel for Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu and Bishop Charles Albertine yesterday. Both priests have been hospitalized for persistent illnesses in recent weeks. Let's take a look at some of the comments that have been doing the rounds on social media. India Business Week says, "Don't raise your voice, improve your argument." That's a famous quote from Bishop Desmond Tutu. Then Victor Howard John says, "When your dreams turn to dust, vacuum." Another wonderful Desmond Tutu quote, of course, running. Matteo Cornello says, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite of all the darkness." Yes, our thoughts are with Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu today. eBook Daily Dale says, "Without forgiveness, there is no future." Talking about Desmond Tutu quotes. And then Bianca says, "If you want to make peace, you don't talk to your friends. You talk to your enemies." Thank you very much, Bianca. We don't do enough of that in the world, really. Now, let's take a look from the front pages around the globe. We start in Europe. The Times says that hundreds of millions of pounds from Britain's future aid budget will be diverted to relieve the migration crisis, with the country about to take in thousands more refugees than expected. Then we move to New York. The Wall Street Journal reports that Pope Francis responded to Europe's burgeoning immigration crisis yesterday, asking every Catholic church on the continent to set an example of Christian mercy by taking in a family of refugees. Then finally in China, the South China Morning Post says that China today lowered its GDP growth figure for last year by 10 basis points to 7.3%. Our authorities said as concerns mount over slowing expansion in the world's second largest economy. Now let's take a look at what's happening on Newsroom's Facebook page. Hundreds of people gathered at the Anglican Church of the Resurrection in Bonteheuwel, that is in Cape Town, to pray for the recovery of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu and Bishop Charles Albertine. Then Morocco's ruling Islamist party won most of the country's key cities during Friday's local elections, further expanding its reach after 4 years of leading a coalition government that undertook major financial challenges. And Pope Francis called on every European parish and religious community to take in one refugee family in a gesture of solidarity. He said he'll aim to start in the tiny Vatican state where he lives. For more on that story, and a lovely story it is on this Monday morning, you can tap in Newsroom, SABC Newsroom, in the left-hand top search bar. Our page will pop up, you like it, and we'll send you all the stories as they break. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
What is beauty? Is it a view that's been waiting for you for centuries? A setting that gives you goosebumps when you see it for the first time? Is it a moment that stops you in your tracks and leaves you in awe? Some people spend their whole lives looking for it. When you open yourself up to it, suddenly you find yourself in a place where true beauty isn't something you'll ever see. Because when you meet South Africa, you'll reconsider what you think you know.
Even the best of us need support. For more than 10 years, we at SEDA have been giving non-financial support to and developing SMMEs as well as cooperatives, helping them to create jobs. SEDA, together advancing small enterprise development.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a quick look at the stories making headlines today. Newly elected ANC Youth League President Colin Maine has called on the league to refrain from resolving political issues through the courts. At the close of the league's 25th National Congress in Midrand yesterday, he said members who headed to court last week to try and stop the Congress will be expelled. The ANC Youth League members in the Northwest who launched the court bid alleged that there were irregularities in branch membership. Today, the 14th World Forestry Congress gets underway in Durban. It's being held in Africa for the first time. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to open the Congress later today at the Nkosi Albert Lutuli International Convention Center. And the girlfriend of late hip-hop star Nkululeko Flabba Habedi will today go on trial for the killing of the artist. Sindisiwe Mankwele says she acted in self-defense after being arrested and charged with murder. Flabber was found dead in his flat in Alexandria earlier this year. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for SABC Newsroom. Of course, you can also follow us on Twitter. Just search for @SABC Newsroom. Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Janine. The UNISA Talent Management Conference is set to start today and will focus on new solutions in a search for talent and management in an ever-changing digital world. I interviewed the managing director at Accenture Digital here in South Africa, Lee Nike, who is one of the keynote speakers at this week's conference. Technology is developing at a fast pace, continuously introducing new products and services into every market around the world. But many businesses are simply not keeping up. As the pressure builds for businesses to remain competitive in this ever-changing digital world, workers with a new set of skills are needed. Now, the inaugural UNISA Talent Management Conference will take place next week and is set to define the next practice in talent management. Now, joining us today is the Managing Director at Accenture Digital in South Africa, Lee Nike. Good morning, Lee.
Morning, Eben.
One of the main themes of the summit is disruptive innovation. Just tell us what that is.
Well, the reality is that the world is changing right now. So we as citizens, governments, organizations live in a place that's highly disrupted. The way things worked 5 years ago and the skills we needed 5 or 10 years ago clearly has changed. In fact, there are jobs in place today that didn't exist 1 or 2 years ago. So how do we keep up with the pace of surviving in a market that's under high pressure, job losses that are currently happening? How do you drive survival at an employee level and as an organization level to drive our very success in the marketplace?
Talent management, the concept, just explain it to us.
Talent management embraces the entire process of attracting the right people into an organization, honing the skills they need to execute their jobs, and keeping them continuously improving to discharge their responsibilities throughout their career.
You talk about the changing world and adapting to change, and of course change being the only constant that we know. Why is it important for you to escalate a wider discussion around this?
Well, one of the biggest things we've seen is that this world is disrupting, and the kind of jobs that we need to execute on is very different than we've previously had. So some of the skills that individuals need, they wouldn't get traditionally via the universities or technical college. We've got to find new ways to embrace the changes in the landscape by putting in practices in place on talent management to allow individuals to skill up.
The themes, the critical themes that will be discussed at the conference from next week, what are those that you'll be looking at?
One of the key things I'll be looking at is something called reimagining the workforce. It talks about the disruptive nature of technology and how that comes together in the workforce, where technology, robotics works alongside humans. So we're starting to see individuals upskill in new and diverse ways. So previously, we'd have to go to universities, schools, and do long courses. Now we're able to tap into something called MOOCs. MOOCs standing for Massive Open Online Courses, where you and I and those around us can acquire skills to make us relevant in the marketplace. Other topics being covered go all the way from talent strategy and organization strategies to embrace this changing workforce.
Is this process happening right now organically amongst young people? Or is it a question of us having to change gear to get young people to understand where the world is going?
That's actually a great question. I would argue that most organizations don't know how to deal with these millennials. As a millennial, they've been born in a highly digital world. They've been used to their iPads and Android devices. And most organizations are geared up for a very manual and a physical setup. So part of the change and the discussion that happened next week is how do we organize, what processes are in place, what culture do we promote for the youngster that wants to work in a totally different way to the way we worked 10 to 15 years ago.
Tertiary institutions, the pressure is obviously on them to bring people into the workplace that can adapt to change and that can welcome change and are not afraid of technology. Are our tertiary institutions dealing with this enough, or are we seeing the people coming out of our tertiary institutions lacking a little bit?
Well, I think that the universities are starting to embrace the need that they have to change. This conference is one of those things. I think, however, that universities aren't doing nearly enough. They are being challenged by online education, courses that you can now consume, in many cases, free of charge or at a much smaller basis. We call these nano degrees. So I think university will have to evolve to cater for both traditional students who want to pursue a normal academic career, but as well as to pursue very short-term courses that allow education organizations to put people into the marketplace to empower the economy in a much shorter space.
How do you, at Accenture, for instance, how do you keep pace of technology that is changing so fast? What is hip today is gone tomorrow.
Absolutely, and that's another great question. So as part of our organization, we have an internal capability, a research lab that keeps track with the changing landscape. So not only do we embrace the changes happening around in the world, we start to look at the services and the products we offer to change as the environment changes. The second thing we do is we look at how we execute on these services. As part of reimagining the workforce, we look at how we can partner as part of a broader ecosystem with our peers, with our competitors, with academics to deliver on services in new ways that we haven't done before.
Well, quick costume change, Jane, I'm back. No, that interview was done last week, the same as the next one you're going to watch now. In the midst of South Africa's growing isolation in the field of international sport, Errol Tobias became the country's first black Springbok rugby player. Errol is the author now of a book called Pure Gold. You can get it at all bookstores. I spoke to him yesterday about his sporting career from an early age and also the difficult issues we're facing with transformation today. In the midst of South Africa's growing isolation in the field of international sport more than 20 years ago now, Errol Tobias became the country's first black Springbok rugby player. In his newly released book, he tells the story of his sporting career from childhood to the major moments in the green and gold. In the book, Errol also touches on the controversy that followed him, a question that, to this day, still haunts many Springbok players of colour. Were you chosen on merit, or are you just used as a pawn for political ends, transformation in today's language? Now, we are joined from Cape Town this morning by Errol Tobias, the man who wrote this book. It's called Pure Gold, and very much like in his heyday, Errol was pure gold. Very good morning to you, Errol. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Evan. Good day to you and all listeners on SABC2. Wonderful feeling, exciting times waiting for us.
Now, Errol, tell me, what do you see as the high points in the book that you've written? And I see you releasing it just before the World Cup. You're not causing any controversy, are you?
You know that the truth needs to be spoken about. In my biography, Pure Gold, I just want the world to share my humble experience and realize and know that God meant it for good. I hope that whoever read my story would realize in how diverse and complex society of rugby followers I had to prove myself on the highest stage of Springbok rugby. I was taunted and mocked, but my rugby skills was outstanding and pulled me through from one stepping platform to the highest stage to eventually become the first Springbok of colour in South Africa in 1980. Now, in my biography, Pure Gold, my message addresses quota versus merit issues, as well as some structural ideas on how coaches should apply their minds in electing the rugby sides at top level. Now, in Pure Gold, I too address development of players of colour on a serious note, and I would give direction for our country in the way forward. In Pure Gold, I hope that all readers will have a lively debate in my trial and tribulations. I'm eagerly waiting on your response, South Africa.
Now, South Africa is going to the World Cup now, and there's been a lot of talk around the transformation issue around Heineke Meyer not picking enough black players and picking them and keeping on the bench. What are your views of this team going to the World Cup, and what is your views on where we are with transforming the game in South Africa?
Yes, Eben, it's such a pity that not more players of colour, which played so well in the Super 15 competition, didn't get a chance to play in the earlier test to prove their mettle. So it's all about bringing them through the right structures, and from Super 15, when the young ones, let them play in a lighter test, such as play against Italy, Scotland, just so that they can get the feel of it, and that we sort of blend them into the Springbok culture on that note.
Yeah, it's about giving him a fair opportunity, like Rudy Page is going to a World Cup without having played a game for the Springbok. But this is about you, Errol. Let's go back to the 80s. Tell us, you made your debut at 34 years old, which is, in today's rugby, unheard of, to even play at 34 years old. You made your debut for the Boks against England at 34, at a time when people were mocking you and laughing at you. Tell us about that experience, and do you think you would have been much better if you were picked earlier?
Yes, of course, I would have been so much better, but just to correct a bit, I was elected at the age of 30, and I played for 4 years in the Springbok culture till 84. But when I was elected at the age of 30, we must bear in mind I played against the best. I've proved my mettle against Hugo Porta. He was the world's best flyer at that stage. And then I went from strength to strength. On that specific day, I literally ran Hugo Porta to shreds. And Doc Craven, the mastermind behind South Africa's rugby at that stage, he was furious that I wasn't elected for the 4th test against the Lions for South Africa. So I came into a time that there was lots of talks and distrust, and it was a diverse sort of culture in our country. But fact of the matter is, I had to prove myself, and my rugby talent stood out. People, at that stage, they had a quote. They said, when Dani Gerber or Tobias touched the ball, people literally rose out of their seats to capture every moment in the manner in how they played.
No, there's no doubt that you lit up that time when you played rugby, Errol. But the message that you want to leave South Africa with your book, what do you want people to take out of this book?
First and foremost, we should strive for peace, irrespective of how anyone differ in opinion. To me, at this stage, it is essential for South Africa. Our lifespan is short. Therefore, we need to strive for peace. But in the differences, whoever competes need to be prepared, and so that he can give his best for South Africa on that stage. So it's endurance, trials and tribulations will be there, but you need to give your all for South Africa, and the rest will fall in place.
Well, Errol, I believe you would have been, in today's world, you would have been one of the players, one of the world players of the year in this day and age. That I can guarantee everyone in South Africa. That's how good you were. But quickly tell us, where can we buy the book?
Pure Gold is available at every bookshop all over the country. And yes, I can literally say to people, rush and get your books and relive my days, as they've called me then, Black Magic, Pure Gold.
Black Magic, Pure Gold. Thank you very much, Errol Tobias. Caledon's biggest export. That's Caledon, a small town, but an hour outside of Cape Town. Errol was also the mayor of Caledon, mind you, at some point in time. Very interesting man and a fantastic story. The book is called Pure Gold. It's a story of Errol Tobias, the first ever black Springbok. Yeah, that was a fantastic story. That interview, I have to tell you, I did last week. So I didn't buy some token just jumped into a new outfit. Just to wrap up today, we take a quick look back at the week. Lewis Hamilton, of course, won again. This is his third Italian Grand Prix win in the 7th of the 2015 season. Of course, he beat the challenge of Ferrari's Sebastian Vettel by, well, nearly half a minute to extend his lead to 53 points now in the driver's standing. Here are some of the comments. Juliana Joshua said Lewis arrived in Monza on a motorbike but quickly laid down the title gauntlet to Nico Rosberg on 4 wheels in opening practice. Yes, he was simply too good. Time Sports, Lewis inside of the title after a tyre ride at the Italian Grand Prix. Yes, his tyre pressures apparently were too low, but he still went on to go and win that race at a canter. There's the classic celebration. Spraying this champagne, Lewis Hamilton's best weekend after cruising to victory. That's where Newsroom leaves you on this Monday morning. Of course, the show is broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. We're also live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.
Art is an expression like no other. Sculpture speaks a language that painting and other two-dimensional plastic art cannot reproduce. Maybe this is because sculpture points to something beyond itself in a way a poem does. Professor Pitiganduli's passion for Africa underpins his sculptural language.
I am the one that hallucinates in forms. I hallucinate shapes. I hallucinate